There's a moment I keep coming back to. My grandmother is sitting at her vanity. She's maybe 60 in this memory, the age I am now starting to understand differently than I did at 10. Her daughter, my mother's older sister, is standing behind her watching. Not helping. Watching. My grandmother picks up a brush, does something specific with her wrist that I couldn't have described then and still struggle to describe now. Says something. My aunt nods, files it away somewhere. That was the classroom. No textbook, no YouTube tutorial, no dermatologist. A woman watching another woman at a mirror, and a few sentences spoken quietly that contained 20 years of accumulated knowledge about how skin works and what it needs and what it absolutely does not need. I have spent the last 3 years trying to reconstruct what was in those sentences. 20 of them are in this video. Why this transmission broke. Before we get into the 20 secrets, I want to spend 2 minutes on something that I think matters. The transmission of beauty knowledge from mother to daughter, the specific, practical, product-level knowledge about how to care for skin and hair and nails, broke in the 1960s and 1970s. Not completely, but the chain that had run uninterrupted for generations cracked. There were 2 reasons. The first was the beauty industry's deliberate replacement of passed-down knowledge with purchased solutions. If your mother's advice was sufficient, you bought nothing. If her advice could be made to seem outdated, insufficient, or embarrassing, you bought whatever the magazine recommended. The industry spent enormous resources making the older generation's knowledge seem like folklore. The second reason was generational friction. The daughters of the 1950s women were, in many cases, actively rejecting their mother's world. The apron, the vanity routine, the careful maintenance. The beauty knowledge got thrown out with the domestic expectations it was associated with. What survived the break was the surface stuff. Moisturize. Wear sunscreen. Remove your makeup before bed. What didn't survive was the specific knowledge, the exact technique, the particular sequence, the things that sound obvious once you hear them, but that nobody thinks to say because they assume you already know. Those are the 20 things in this video. If someone passed something down to you, a technique, a product, a piece of advice from your mother or grandmother, subscribe to this channel and leave it in the comments. I read every single one. Hit the bell. We're just getting started. Secret 1. Always apply skincare to a damp face, never dry. This was not negotiable in the 1950s household. The sequence was specific. Cleanse, pat, not rub, pat, until the face was damp but not dripping. Then apply immediately. Before the skin had time to fully dry. The reason is physics, not chemistry. The stratum corneum, the outermost layer of the skin, is a lipid matrix that regulates water content. When it is damp, it is slightly swollen and more permeable. Products applied to damp skin penetrate the surface more efficiently than products applied to dry skin, which is closed back down to its baseline permeability. A 2010 study in the Journal of Investigative Dermatology measured transepidermal absorption rates on damp versus dry skin and found measurably higher absorption on the damp surface for lipid-soluble compounds, exactly the category that most moisturizing ingredients fall into. The 1950s woman who applied her cold cream immediately after patting her face dry was getting more out of that cold cream than the woman who let her face dry completely first. She didn't know the phrase, quote, zero. She knew her mother told her not to wait. Secret 2. Cold water as the final rinse, always. Every morning cleanse ended with cold water. Not lukewarm, cold. This came down from the generation before the 1950s women, from grandmothers who had learned it from their grandmothers in a chain that probably predates running water in homes. The mechanism. The small capillaries in the facial skin dilate with heat and constrict with cold. The brief vasoconstriction from cold water after cleansing temporarily tightens the appearance of pores and reduces the mild inflammation that even gentle cleansing causes. But the real reason the cold final rinse mattered, the reason dermatologists now recommend it, is the pH effect. Tap water is slightly alkaline. Alkaline exposure on the skin surface disrupts the acid mantle, the thin protective film on the skin that sits at approximately pH 5.5 and protects against environmental pathogens. Cold water, for reasons related to the solubility of minerals at different temperatures, has a slightly lower effective alkalinity on skin than hot water. Over 40 years of twice-daily cold final rinses, the cumulative difference in acid mantle preservation is measurable. My grandmother's cold final rinse was not a beauty ritual. It was 40 years of protecting her acid mantle. The photographs are the evidence. Secret 3. Never pull the skin downward. Direction mattered in a 1950s skincare routine in a way that has been completely lost. Everything went up. Every stroke of cold cream removal went upward and outward. Every pat of toner went upward. Every morning cleanse moved upward from the jaw toward the forehead. The reasoning was stated simply: skin falls down on its own. Don't help it. This is not superstition. The ligaments that anchor the skin to the underlying facial structure are oriented in specific directions. Repeated mechanical stress against those orientations over decades contributes to the directional laxity that becomes visible as the face ages. Dermatologists and plastic surgeons now teach exactly this, that the mechanical vector of product application matters for long-term skin structure. The 1950s mother who told her daughter to always move upward was teaching facial anatomy in the language of habit. Secret 4. The neck gets everything the face gets. No exceptions, no excuses. The neck was treated as part of the face in the 1950s beauty routine. Cold cream went on the neck. Toner went on the neck. Sun protection, in the form of scarves, hats, and the habit of staying out of direct midday sun, covered the neck. The neck has the same skin as the face, but less of the subcutaneous fat that gives the face some structural resilience. It also has more exposure to gravitational pull through the range of motion of daily movement. It ages faster than the face under the same conditions. The woman whose face looks 20 years younger than her neck, a pattern that is common and visible, is the woman whose face received decades of care that stopped at the jawline. The 1950s mother who said, "and the neck," every time, was preventing that pattern before it started. Secret 5. Petroleum jelly on the lips every single night. I covered this in a different video from a different angle, but I want to address it here, specifically as transmitted knowledge because of how it was passed down. It was not discussed as a beauty tip. It was stated as a fact of maintenance, like checking the oil in the car, like locking the door at night. Petroleum jelly on the lips before sleep was in the same category as brushing teeth, a thing that was simply done, without negotiation, every night. The occlusive barrier that petroleum jelly creates during sleep hours allows the thin skin of the lips to retain moisture without exposure to air, saliva, or movement. Over years of nightly application, the lips of a woman who kept this habit looked different from the lips of a woman who did not. The 1950s daughter who received this instruction didn't ask why. She watched her mother open the small jar before bed for 20 years. Then she did it herself. Then she either passed it on or didn't. Most didn't. Secret 6. Hairbrush clean, every single week. The hairbrush was cleaned weekly. Not when it looked dirty, weekly. The specific method: remove accumulated hair first, pulled out from the base of the bristles with a comb, not ripped. Then soak in warm water with a small amount of baking soda for 10 minutes. Rinse. Dry bristle side down on a towel. The reasoning, as it was passed down: quote 3 __. The science is more specific. Hairbrush bristles accumulate sebum, dead skin cells, product residue, and environmental particulates between cleaning. A brush used to distribute the scalp's natural oils along the hair shaft, the 100-stroke technique, does the opposite when contaminated. It redistributes accumulated debris back onto clean hair and directly onto the scalp. The weekly cleaning of the brush was essential to the effectiveness of the brushing routine it supported. You cannot use a contaminated tool to clean something and expect the cleaning to work. This detail, clean the brush, was so mundane that it almost didn't survive. Most of the daughters who received it forgot it within a decade of leaving home. Secret 7. Never go to bed with product in your hair. Whatever went into the hair during the day, setting lotion, hairspray, a small amount of pomade at the temples, came out before sleep. Not rinsed out, brushed out with the clean brush. A thorough brushing that distributed any remaining product along the length of the hair and off the ends, then removed the ends residue with a final pass. The pillow that a head sleeps on for 8 hours is a direct contact surface for the scalp and the facial skin at the hairline. Product residue transferred from the hair to the pillowcase, then to the face during the night, was understood as a cause of breakouts at the hairline and temples. This is documented in dermatology as acne mechanica and acne cosmetica, the two categories of breakouts caused by mechanical friction and cosmetic product contact, respectively. The 1950s woman who brushed her hair before bed and changed her pillowcase weekly was managing both vectors without having the vocabulary for either. Secret 8. Sunlight on the face is a choice, not a given. This is the one that sounds most dated and turns out to be the most correct. The 1950s woman's relationship with sun exposure was not accidental. She wore hats. She wore scarves. She sat in the shade when shade was available. She did not sunbathe her face. This was not fear of cancer. The UV skin cancer connection was not yet part of public health messaging. It was aesthetic. The older women in her family who had maintained their skin had done these things. The ones who had not showed the difference. What she was protecting against: photoaging, the breakdown of collagen and elastin by UV radiation, the accumulation of DNA damage in skin cells that manifests as spots and texture changes, we now have a complete molecular explanation for. The American Academy of Dermatology estimates that approximately 90% of visible skin aging is caused by UV exposure rather than chronological aging. The 1950s mother who said, quote, 4, and handed her daughter a hat, was giving the single most effective anti-aging instruction available then or now. Secret 9. Cold cream removes makeup. Soap removes cold cream. This sequencing was precise and was passed down as a rule, not a suggestion. First application of cold cream. Removed makeup. Massaged gently in circular motions, then wiped away with a soft cloth. This step removed color cosmetics, the day's surface debris, and most of the day's sebum accumulation. Second application. Lighter. Removed the residue of the first application and any remaining cold cream. Wiped away. Final rinse. Cool water. The reason for the two-step removal is barrier preservation. A single removal step with an aggressive cleanser removes makeup, but also strips the acid mantle and the surface lipids. The cold cream first step removes most of the load, so that the final rinse is removing a small remaining residue rather than fighting the full day's accumulation. Modern cleansing science has returned to this exactly. The double cleanse method currently popular in skincare is a direct rediscovery of what the cold cream routine accomplished. The 1950s woman had no name for it. She had her mother's instruction. Secret 10. Hands are always the last thing moisturized. The sequence of the morning routine ended at the hands. Not because the hands were unimportant, the opposite. Because the hands touched everything else. Moisturizer on the face, then the neck, then the décolletage. All applied before the hands received their own treatment. The hands, already having applied everything else, had absorbed a residue of whatever had been used and received their own dedicated application last. Then, and this was the specific instruction, at least 5 minutes before touching anything that would show fingerprints or transfer product. The logic. Moisturizer on the hands immediately before putting on white gloves, handling delicate fabrics, or doing anything that required clean hands was counterproductive. The weight allowed the product to absorb rather than transfer. This is a detail so practical it sounds like common sense, which is exactly why it was passed down as common sense, stated once, expected to be remembered, never explained. Secret 11. Sleep on your back or use silk. The pillow instruction was specific. Sleep on your back if you can manage it. If you cannot, if you are a side sleeper with no intention of changing, then the pillowcase must be silk or satin, not cotton. The reasoning, as passed down: cotton is rough, it pulls. The dermatological explanation is more precise. Cotton pillowcases have a surface texture that creates friction against the facial skin during the hours of movement that happen during sleep. The micro-repositioning that adds up to significant mechanical stress on the delicate skin around the eyes and the creases of the face. Silk has a surface friction coefficient significantly lower than cotton. A 2020 study in the Journal of Cosmetic Dermatology found measurable differences in sleep crease formation between cotton and silk pillowcase users over time. The 1950s mother who said, quote, 5, was addressing sleep biomechanics. The instruction came from observation across generations of women in her family. The science came later. Secret 12. Never touch your face unless your hands are clean. This was not about germophobia. It was not anxiety. It was a practical rule about surface contamination. The hands pick up oils, particles, and bacteria from every surface they touch. The face, specifically the perioral and nasal areas, and the skin around the eyes, is in contact with mucous membranes and is more vulnerable to transferred contamination than any other external surface. The 1950s woman, who kept a handkerchief specifically so she did not need to touch her face with bare hands in public, was not being fussy. She was limiting the transfer of the day's accumulated hand contamination to the most permeable surface of her body. The University of New South Wales study I've referenced before, the one that clocked face-touching frequency at 16 times per hour, was conducted in the context of infectious disease transmission. Its implications for skin health are identical. 16 transfers per hour of whatever is on the hands to whatever is on the face. The handkerchief was a physical reminder not to touch. The 1950s daughter who received this instruction and maintained the habit had fewer breakouts and better surface skin health than the daughter who didn't. The mechanism is not complicated. Secret 13. The cuticle is never cut, only pushed. This came down with the specific instruction never to cut the cuticle, only to push it back gently after soaking. The cuticle is a seal. It covers the point where the nail plate meets the skin and prevents bacteria and fungi from entering the nail fold. Cutting the cuticle removes the seal entirely. The regrowth is irregular, the seal is incomplete, and the risk of nail fold infection, paronychia, increases. The technique that was passed down: soak the fingers for 5 minutes in warm water, then push the cuticle back with a soft cloth or the rounded end of an orange stick. Never cut. Never tear. This is now standard in dermatology. The American Academy of Dermatology currently recommends exactly this: no cutting, gentle pushing after soaking. The 1950s mother who said, "Never cut it, only push," was transmitting nail anatomy without knowing the word paronychia. Secret 14. Fragrance goes on the pulse points, and then nothing touches them. 2 parts to this instruction. The second part is what got lost. First, apply fragrance to the pulse points, wrists, inner elbows, the base of the throat, behind the ears. The warmth of blood close to the surface at these points activates the top notes of the fragrance and helps it project. Second, do not rub the wrists together. This part. This specific instruction. Do not rub. The rubbing motion generates friction and heat that breaks down the molecular structure of the fragrance's top notes before they have time to project. The delicate aldehydes and lighter esters that constitute the first impression of a fragrance are physically damaged by the mechanical action of rubbing. The wrist rub is so universal now that it has become the defining gesture of applying perfume. The 1950s mother who said, quote, 7, was protecting the structure of the fragrance. Her daughter smelled better for longer, with less product. Secret 15. Eyebrows grow back slower with age. Never overpluck. This one was stated as a warning, a cautionary instruction delivered with the specific weight of something that had been learned the hard way by someone in the family. The advice? Take only what is obviously stray. Never follow a trend. Never thin the arch more than you would if you had to draw it back with a pencil, because someday you might have to. The follicular biology is real. Repeated plucking of hair follicles over years causes progressive follicular damage. The follicle that has been repeatedly traumatized produces thinner, sparser regrowth. By the time a woman reaches her 50s and 60s, the brow follicles that received decades of aggressive plucking may no longer produce full-density hair. The overplucked thin brows of the 1990s and early 2000s are now the underfilled brows, requiring pencil and pomade and powder to reconstruct something that was removed 30 years earlier. The 1950s mother who said, quote, 8, was protecting the follicular density her daughter would want at 60. Secret 16. Hair is dried in the direction it grows, never against. The direction of towel drying and air drying was specific. The hair cuticle, the overlapping scales on the surface of each hair shaft, lies flat when the hair is healthy and oriented in its growth direction. Friction against the cuticle in the reverse direction lifts the scales, creates a rough surface that reflects light irregularly and catches on adjacent hairs, and makes the hair more susceptible to breakage. Towel drying with aggressive rubbing, the motion most people use, is the single most damaging thing that happens to hair in a typical routine. It happens twice a day on most women's hair, over years. The 1950s mother who said, pat it, don't rub it, and dry it going downward, was describing cuticle alignment without the vocabulary for it. Her daughter's hair had a surface smoothness that no product would have provided if the cuticle had been lifted twice daily for decades. Secret 17. Never apply heat to wet hair. Not slightly damp, not almost dry. Fully dry before any heat. The water inside a wet hair shaft, trapped within the cortex by the closed cuticle, becomes steam when subjected to rapid heat. Steam expands. The pressure of expanding steam inside the hair shaft creates microbubbles that compromise the structural integrity of the cortex. This is called bubble hair in trichology. It is literally visible under microscopy as small air pockets within the hair shaft of heat-damaged hair. It produces brittleness, breakage, and a surface texture that no conditioner can repair because the damage is internal. The 1950s woman who set her hair on rollers and sat under the dryer on a low heat waited until the hair was genuinely dry before touching it with any hot styling tool. The instruction __quote_10__ was structural engineering applied to hair. Secret 18. Rouge goes where the sun would hit, not where tutorials say. This is a makeup instruction that contains more sophistication than it appears to. The placement of color on the face, whether rouge, powder, or any contouring product, was determined in the 1950s by where natural light and natural flush actually occurred. The cheekbones, the bridge of the nose, the center of the forehead, the chin. Not, quote, 11. That technique came later and produces a result that looks artificial in natural light because natural flush never occurs in the hollows of the cheeks. It occurs on the prominences. The 1950s mother who showed her daughter where to apply rouge was teaching her to mimic a natural state rather than create a constructed one. The face that looked most natural in the photographs of that era was the face that used color descriptively rather than architecturally. Secret 19. Less powder is always more. This came down as a rule about the finishing step. The powder goes on last, and less is more, always. The specific instruction was to apply, then remove most of it. Press the powder puff to the face, then take a soft brush and remove the majority of what was applied. What remains is a veil, imperceptible as powder, visible only as a slight mattifying of the surface. Too much powder settles into fine lines and emphasizes them. It collects at the corners of the mouth and the outer edges of the eyes. It makes the face look drier and older than the face beneath it. The restraint instruction, apply and remove most of it, produced a result that photographs from the 1950s consistently show. A face that looks like a face, not a face that looks made up. The current trend toward heavy coverage products has reversed this. The 1950s instruction was about minimum effective dose applied to maximum effect. It has not been widely passed down. Secret 20. The routine is for yourself, not for anyone watching. This is the last one, and the one that I think explains all the others. It was stated differently in different households, but the version I've heard most consistently in the oral history research I've done for this channel goes something like this. __, quote, _, 12 __. The cold water rinse, the petroleum jelly on the lips, the clean brush, the upward strokes, the silk pillowcase. All of it, performed in private, in the morning and the evening, whether or not anyone was watching or would notice. The discipline of a beauty routine in the 1950s was not performance. It was maintenance. The same category as the clean kitchen and the maintained car. Things you did because they needed doing, not because anyone was going to applaud. The women who maintained that discipline for decades have faces that the photographs document. Not because of genetics, not because of expensive products, because they did the small things, alone, twice a day, without an audience, for 50 years. What I've been thinking about. I want to say something personal here before we close. I've been doing this research for 3 years. I've read the magazines, the household manuals, the beauty columns. I've talked to women in their 70s and 80s about what they remember being taught. And the thing that strikes me most is not the techniques. It's the context. These 20 things were not taught in a classroom. They were transmitted in passing, at the vanity, in the bathroom before school, while watching someone else do something specific with her hands. The instruction was embedded in relationship. You learned it because you were paying attention to someone you loved. That context is gone. The transmission mechanism broke. The knowledge didn't disappear. It's still recoverable, which is what this channel is trying to do. But the specific intimacy of watching your mother at her vanity and having her teach you without calling it teaching, that's something else. My grandmother at her vanity, my aunt watching. The wrist motion I still can't quite describe. That's what we lost when the chain broke. The techniques are recoverable. That specific moment is not. 20 secrets, all of them passed down from a generation that learned them from the generation before. Damp face for application. Cold final rinse. Upward strokes only. The neck gets everything. Petroleum jelly at night. The clean brush. No product to bed. Stay out of the sun. 2-step removal. Hands last. Sleep on silk. Don't touch your face. Never cut the cuticle. Apply and leave the perfume alone. Protect the brows. Dry in the direction it grows. Fully dry before heat. Color where the sun hits. Powder that disappears. And the routine that's for you, not for the audience. None of them cost anything to implement. Several of them you can start tonight. Leave a comment with one thing on this list that someone in your family passed down to you. Or one thing that wasn't passed down, that you wish had been. I read all of them, and the comments on this channel have become one of the best collections of practical beauty knowledge I've ever encountered. You're part of building that. Like the video if something here was something you already knew but had never heard explained. And if you're new to this channel, welcome. There's more where this came from. She knew. We forgot. Now you remember.